Hello there. You're watching All 24 News, World News program with me, Kiran Zachary, and up next are the headlines. Trump says U.S. strikes stopped Iran from reaching the nuclear threshold. Tehran, meanwhile, calls U.S. sanctions a declaration of war amid reports of new regional security arrangements. Next up, Sahrawi groups condemn Ryanair's promotion of Dakhla as tourist destination, accusing it of whitewashing Morocco's occupation. Also in our news, deadly Russian-Ukrainian attacks reported across several fronts. Germany pledges more support for Kiev, while Putin rejects current peace proposals. And U.S. tariffs on Canada set to take effect on Sunday. Ottawa plans reciprocal measures as Brazil's Lula urges Trump to resume talks. These stories and more shortly. Hello there and welcome back to the details. First off in our news, U.S. President Donald Trump has again claimed that the Strait of Hormuz is American territory, saying U.S. forces have full control of the strategic waterway and surrounding areas. Donald Trump also said Iran wants a deal, but it is not ready to accept the right one. He added that U.S. strikes have prevented Tehran from reaching the nuclear threshold as well.
So we went down and we stopped them. They'll never have a nuclear weapon. They want to make a deal so badly. We don't even know if we want, because I view the Strait of Hormuz as an American territory right now. It's an American territory.
Well, Iranian Parliament Speaker and Chief Negotiator Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf says Tehran has received messages from neighboring countries on new security arrangements and stronger regional economic cooperation. He accused the U.S. of undermining the security of its regional allies and called for an independent regional system led by countries in the region. In the same context, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baqai says new U.S. sanctions amount to an attempt to impose American sovereignty beyond its borders. He described the measures as more than an economic war, calling them an illegal form of economic coercion and a return to colonial practices. Also, the Iranian military says it has shifted its doctrine from defensive to offensive one. Army spokesman Mohammad Akrami Nia says the change followed the two recent wars with the U.S. during which Iran carried out preemptive operations against American interests in the region. He warned of an immediate and broad response to any attack on Iran.
The military doctrine of the Islamic Republic of Iran has shifted during the war from a purely defensive doctrine to an offensive one. The offensive nature of the military doctrine doesn't necessarily mean carrying out preemptive operations, as we have already demonstrated at one stage of this war. This is one aspect of an offensive military doctrine, but it has other dimensions, including that any act of aggression will be met with an immediate response, and that response may be broader in scope than the act of aggression itself.
Meanwhile, in the Strait of Hormuz, Iran has granted special clearance for several Iraqi oil tankers to cross the Strait of Hormuz, following repeated requests from Baghdad. Meanwhile, the U.S. military says more than 660 million barrels of crude have passed through the strait since May, with American forces assisting around 1,300 commercial vessels during the same period. Elsewhere in the Middle East, Israeli occupation forces carried out new strikes on southern Lebanon using white phosphorus, according to certain reports. Lebanese reports, meanwhile, say Kafr Ruman was heavily shelled before dawn, while artillery fire and large-scale explosions also hit El Mansouri and Majdal zone. Across the border in Syria this time, at least one person was injured in an Israeli strike near Beit Jin, southwest of Damascus. Syrian authorities condemned the attack as a violation of the country's sovereignty and called on the international community and UN Security Council to hold the Israeli occupation accountable. Further south in the Gaza Strip, a Palestinian was killed and others injured in a Zionist airstrike in a home in Deir el-Balah, central Gaza. Medical sources say one of the wounded is in a critical condition after the strike hit el-Bassa area west of the city. Still in Gaza, but this time a lighter note. In Gaza City, displaced farming families are returning to their damaged farmland, determined to rebuild their livelihoods after years of war and repeated displacement, despite severe shortages of water, agricultural supplies, and labor. Here's Karim Musfawi with more.
After years of repeated displacement, Palestinian farming families in Gaza City Azaytun neighborhood are returning to the land they were forced to leave behind, determined to rebuild their livelihoods from the ground up, despite immense challenges as water for irrigation is scarce, agricultural supplies are expensive and difficult to find, and many families cannot afford to hire workers.
When we returned after being displaced, the land was covered with piles of rubble and debris and was difficult to access. Everyone in the family worked together to rehabilitate it for farming. Thankfully, we were finally able to cultivate it again. We can't afford to hire workers to help us with farming because of the high costs. We also face serious difficulties securing water for irrigation and pesticides. It has been a huge burden on us.
Years of Zionist siege and aggression have left much of Gaza's farmland damaged, destroyed, or inaccessible. Today, the UNDP is helping affected residents rebuild their homes and livelihoods, with more than 1,000 families expected to benefit from an initiative providing housing, essential services, and livelihood supports.
The families have been displaced multiple times to various locations in the middle and south area of the Gaza Strip. What you see here now is life returning to the neighborhood. And UNDP supports these families through providing dignified shelters and housing solutions through what we call relief housing unit.
For many displaced families, every harvest means more than food or income. It is a sign that life is slowly returning to their neighborhood, devastated by the Zionist war machine.
Turning to Western Sahara now, the Sahrawi human rights group Qadessa has called for respect for the legal status of occupied Dakhla as part of Western Sahara. The group condemned Ryanair's tourism campaign promoting the city as a destination, saying it helps legitimize Morocco's occupation and impose status quo.
We condemn the advertising campaign published by Ryanair on the Instagram platform, promoting the occupied city of Dakhla as a tourist destination, in blatant disregard for its legal status as part of the Western Sahara territory. We consider that this commercial and tourist promotion contributes to entrenching the fait accompli imposed by the Moroccan occupying power, and to normalizing its presence and control over the territory, thereby undermining the inalienable rights of the Sahrawi people, foremost among them their right to self-determination and independence. Under international law, Western Sahara has a separate and distinct legal status from the territories under the sovereignty of any other state, as a non-self-governing territory.
Qadessa also rejected what it called the commercial exploitation of Dakhla's natural resources and tourism potential, warning against using the city to promote and whitewash Morocco's occupation.
We reject turning the occupied city of Dakhla, its wealth and natural resources, and its tourism and cultural potential into a tool for commercial promotion and whitewashing the reality of the Moroccan occupation. We call on Ryanair to immediately withdraw the advertising campaign concerning the occupied city of Dakhla and to refrain from any tourism or commercial promotion that could entrench or legitimize the reality of the Moroccan occupation of Western Sahara.
Still with Western Sahara cause, but this time more broadly, Sahrawi rights and media groups warn of escalating smear campaigns targeting Sahrawi activists and journalists. Activist Hassan Zarwali told All 24 News Channel that the campaigns aim to silence independent voices and obscure rights violations in occupied Western Sahara. Elsewhere in North Africa, Tunisian authorities have recovered 6 bodies after a migrant boat sank off the coast of Zarzis in southern Tunisia. 9 people remain missing, while 2 survivors said they spent hours at sea after the boat overturned. Search and rescue operations are still underway. Moving on to a different matter, but still in North Africa, Algeria is taking part as a guest of honor at the 2026 Agra International Agriculture and Food Industry Fair in Slovenia. Representing President of the Republic Abdelmajid Tebboune, Higher Education Minister Kamal Badari highlighted Algeria's agricultural and food products while seeking new partnerships and access to European markets. He also stressed the role of technology, research, and artificial intelligence in advancing sustainable farming and food security. Across the border in Libya this time, Libya's High Council of State has reaffirmed its support for national consensus and called for effective legal and institutional solutions to pave the way for elections. The Council says free and fair polls are the best way to end transitional phases, renew legitimacy, and overcome political and institutional divisions. Moving on now to Eastern Europe and to Ukraine, to be precise. At least 22 people have been killed and dozens injured in Russian attacks across central and southern Ukraine. In Kryvyi, 16 people were killed and 130 wounded in a strike on a shopping center, while 4 others were killed in Mykolaiv. 2 more deaths were reported in Kiev and Sumy. Meanwhile, on the Russian side, at least 10 people have been killed and others injured in Ukrainian attacks across Russia and Russian-controlled areas. 2 children were killed in Yeysk, while Belgorod reported 2 deaths and 13 injuries. A drone strike on an oil refinery in Samara also killed 1 person, while 2 civilians were killed in Luhansk. Still with the same file, diplomatically this time, German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul has pledged further support for Ukraine, accusing Russia of escalating its war of aggression. During a visit to Kiev, Wadephul said Moscow continues to target civilian infrastructure with missiles and drones, vowing continued German assistance to Ukraine. For his part, Russian President Vladimir Putin says current proposals for Ukraine's settlement are unacceptable. He says Moscow remains open to dialogue, but any peace deal must reflect what he calls the realities on the ground. Putin added that discussions on the proposed agreement are still underway.
The proposals that are brought to us are sometimes, I would say, exotic in nature and are considered unacceptable. You are always ready for a dialogue about peace, but only on the basis of realities on the ground.
Moving on now to economy news. U.S. tariffs of 50% on selected Canadian imports have taken effect after Washington and Ottawa failed to reach a last-minute deal. The measures cover around $20 billion in Canadian goods, including cement and hockey sticks. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney has rejected the U.S. conditions as unfair and economically unjustified. Meanwhile, U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Career says Washington has no plans for new trade talks with Canada for now. He said the U.S. is moving ahead with measures to counter Canada's retaliatory tariffs, accusing Ottawa of backing away from an agreement it had previously accepted.
Remember, as President Trump, we don't have new talks planned with the Canadians. We're moving forward with measures that respond to Canadian retaliation. Remember, as President Trump has introduced a trade policy to reshore American production and protect American jobs, two countries have retaliated against the United States, the People's Republic of China and Canada. After a year of that retaliation, we've said enough, and so we've taken countermeasures. Our interest is in protecting American workers and protecting American supply chains. We've been offering to bring the Canadians along on that path, really to cut the tariffs on them, on steel, on tariff autos, even lumber, things that are sensitive for them. And they've always had the best deal, and they still would have an even better deal, but they didn't want that.
In response, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says Ottawa will impose dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods starting September 8th. He says the measures are aimed at protecting Canadian industries and helping them compete with American products in the domestic market.
Canada will match Washington's new tariffs dollar for dollar in order to protect Canadian workers, farmers, families, and businesses. Our response will be concentrated in sectors such as steel, dairy, appliances, agricultural equipment, pulp and paper, and electronics. We'll also include products that are currently subject to unjustified Section 232 and 338 tariffs. This is a focused response to protect and defend our industries and allow them to compete with U.S. products in the Canadian market. In the coming days, we'll release details of these new tariff measures which will come into force the Tuesday after Labor Day.
Meanwhile, Canadian provincial leaders have voiced concern over the breakdown in trade talks with Washington and the new U.S. tariffs. Some urged Prime Minister Mark Carney to respond firmly while calling for negotiations to resume quickly. The dispute is also expected to complicate efforts to renew the U.S.-MCA trade agreement. Elsewhere in the Americas, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has urged U.S. President Donald Trump to resume talks over tariffs on Brazilian goods. Lula rejected U.S. accusations of unfair trade practices as unfounded, as Washington maintains 25% tariffs on a range of Brazilian imports.
The accusations against Brazil regarding unfair trade practices are baseless, and I call for the resumption of negotiations on U.S. tariffs imposed on Brazilian goods. Trump proposed a meeting between officials from both governments as soon as possible, in a move that could pave the way for a return to direct dialogue between Brasilia and Washington.
Back in Africa, Sudanese military sources say army drones carried out airstrikes on rapid support forces positions in 5 areas of West Kordofan. The strikes reportedly targeted Sumayma, Al-Khawi, Labana, Hamas, and Asata, with no details yet on casualties nor the damage. Meanwhile, beyond the battlefield, Sudan's farmers are facing a growing crisis as drought, soaring costs, and conflict threaten the country's food production. Large areas of farmland are being left uncultivated, raising fears of an even deeper food crisis. Zara Ferjani reports.
Among the banks of the Nile, scorched by the heat, Sudanese farmers are struggling to work their fields and keep their crops alive. Fields that would normally be green and thriving in August are now turning brown. In Gedaref state, near the Ethiopian border, where much of Sudan's staple grain is grown, large areas of farmland are being left untouched as rainfall continues to fall short, and the impact is being felt across the country.
We are facing a serious problem because there simply isn't enough rain. The sesame crop, which is so important to the country, is now at risk. We are struggling with the rising cost of diesel, higher labor costs, and the soaring prices of fertilizers.
With water running short and the cost of fuel, labor and seeds continuing to climb, more and more farmers are giving up on their fields. Around 65% of Sudan's arable land is already out of use, and the cost of seeds has jumped sharply. A bag of sorghum seeds that cost around 48 euros last year now sells for about 81.
We are feeling the impact of the lack of rain, just like our neighbors. Forecasts suggest rainfall will be below average this year.
For Sudan, the drought is adding to an already devastating crisis. Rainfall shortages, compounded by El Niño, have contributed to a historic drop in Nile water levels. Crops such as sorghum and sesame are under growing threat, raising fears of an even deeper food crisis. Millions of displaced people are already facing severe hunger and depend almost entirely on humanitarian aid that is increasingly difficult to deliver amid the ongoing violence.
And with this, ladies and gentlemen, we wrap up our news for tonight. To catch up on any part you missed or get the latest updates, you can always visit our social media platforms. On behalf of all 24 News team, I'm Karim Zachary. Thank you for watching, and until next time, do take care.